We are recording.
Good evening, everybody. It is 7 p.m., December 19th, 2022. Meeting of the Human Affairs Committee is here in the Aldermanic Chamber, and I'm calling it to order. Madam Clerk, would you like to call the roll?
I sure will. Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly, is not here. Alderman Patricia Clee, I am here. Alderwoman at Large, Gloria Timmons.
Here.
Alderman at Large, Melbourne Moran Jr. is not here. And Chairman Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I'm here.
Thank you. We have 3 in attendance. No one is on Zoom. I think the agenda does call for us to do roll call, but we don't have to do it if no one comes in on
Okay.
Zoom. Okay.
So, for the public's knowledge, Alderman Kelly is feeling ill. She has a stomach bug and doesn't want to share the magic of the season with us.
We appreciate that.
She is trying to come in through Zoom and is not logged on. So, yeah, if she logs in, then we'll alter our procedure so that we don't just vote or accept things without objection. We would do a roll call at that point.
Great. And we also have Director Sullivan and Mr. Julian Long, Urban Program Manager.
Okay. So I guess first order of business here is to open up for public comment. Anybody wishing to make a comment on items expected to be acted or in general, because it's a committee meeting, just step up to the microphone, give your name and your address, and make whatever comments. See a representative of NeighborWorks, if you'd like to make any comments, this would be the best time.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just briefly, I am not going to be speaking this evening, but we do have a representative of NeighborWorks here this evening. Without objection, if the committee would consider their testimony during the consider of the resolution, perhaps in tandem with Mr. Long, that would be preferable as part of tonight's presentation, rather than during the public comment session.
Okay, if the committee doesn't have any objection, I don't.
I have no objection.
I just never have any luck when I try to cane people up here and get them to sit down. So.
Chairman Lopez, I did hear from Alderwoman Kelly, and she will not be able to make it.
Okay.
Tonight.
All right, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So seeing no additional public comment, we can move on to communications.
Yes, communications from Julian Long, Urban Programs Manager, underwriting analysis of the home program application, NeighborWorks of Southern New Hampshire, apartments at 249 Main Street.
All right, just double checking. So we have an additional motion as a resolution coming up, so this is just accepting the communication.
Exactly, and you just have to say there being no objection, yes.
Okay, then there being no objection, I will accept the communication and place it on file. All right, unfinished business?
There's none?
New business resolution.
Yes. R-22-076, approving the use of U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Home Investment Partnership Program funds by NeighborWorks of Southern New Hampshire for the apartments at 249 Main Street. Mr. Chairman, I motion to recommend approval.
Okay. So as we have a motion on the floor and has been recommended, if anyone would like to come up, Mr. Long or Julian, to discuss and present on this.
Good evening. Thank you very much. So this is a home grant application we received for the construction of 45 units at 249 Main Street, currently the vacant lot right across the street from where we are right now. And I do have one correction for the underwriting memo. Originally, when this was written, we were looking at 13 low home units and 21 high home units. That has now been revised to 11, I think, just low home units. And the reason for the revision is 12 units is the threshold at which Davis-Bacon wage rates have to be paid for a project, which really drives up costs. So that is why 11 was selected, and we were still well within our subsidy maximums for the project at 11 home units.
Can you clarify what the low and high home units?
Sure. So low home unit is, there are two set of rental limits that HUD releases for home apartments. The low ones are more affordable. the high home are a little at the upper end. So you're looking at about 30% AMI versus 60%, roughly.
Davis-Bacon Act, can you explain that?
Yes, the Davis-Bacon Act requires payment of certain minimum wage rates for construction-related projects that are federally funded, specific to the home program under HUD. Buildings of 12 units and greater require Davis-Bacon minimum wages.
Alderman Clee?
I just have a process question for you. We need to make an amendment to this, saying that we've already accepted it to be placed on fire? Do we need to make an amendment, or just his conversation enough?
Well, so we accepted the communication, unless you're amending
written.
the actual letter.
That's what he said he is.
Versus this.
I can do so if you'd like to. I'm happy to submit that next month, or, with the, assuming that this goes to the full Board of Aldermen, I'm happy to revise for resubmission.
That'd be just as easy.
I think so too. The
That way
conversation
we're
will
not
have-
like trying to amend your letter with our
Right.
procedure. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll accept what you've already sent to us, but if you could send us an updated one explaining that we changed the demographics or dynamics.
Yes, absolutely.
And the purpose, yes.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions too. If I'm understanding this right, NeighborWorks is asking for funds for this project, but they're reducing the number of low homes, the 30% AMI, because they otherwise would be required to pay minimum wage on people working on the project?
So in a way, nothing's really changing. It's still going to be 45 units, and all 45 of those units are going to be at 80% of area median income or less. Quite a number of them at quite a bit less. At this, the majority are at 60% or under. The number of home units is really the number that are subject to home monitoring and reporting requirements. And that number is being selected to avoid triggering Davis-Bacon wage rates. But the actual number of units in the project overall is not changing.
Okay, the overall number is not
Still that
changing,
45.
But the number of low units that are 30 versus 60 AMI is changing.
No, that is also not changing. It's just the number that we're saying this is what these are the ones we're counting for home. So the unit mix, that is also not changing. We're just picking out the ones that we're saying these are the home units.
Okay. Like I said, it sounded like you were trying to not pay people minimum wage by reducing the number of low income housing, but that is not the case.
Yeah, it's still 45 units, still the same breakdown at which, area median incomes, all those units are going to be. It's just changing really what numbers we're telling HUD that, like, these are the home units we'll be creating. There's nothing that prohibits, the project developer from creating additional affordable housing, which is what this project will do.
Well, and it's worth noting that NeighborWorks is a nonprofit focused on affordable housing. But with the use of the home funds, would they have been otherwise constrained in any way for a period of time, or no?
So a minimum of 15% of our funds have to go towards community housing development organizations. NeighborWorks is one of those. Other than that, we have some funds set aside for our first-time home buyer program that we're hoping to start up this year. Other than that, most of the funds, are not currently spoken for.
Okay. I was more thinking the developer themselves, NeighborWorks, are in some crazy world where they decide to just ignore their mission and their board and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to be like, so now we only have to do 11 of these because we changed the rules. There's nothing in the home funds contract saying, okay, you use these monies for this purpose, you have to keep them for that purpose for 5 years.
Yes. There is an affordability requirement that will apply towards those 11 units. And that's only from us. There's a lot of different funding sources in this project, so there will be other requirements. I'm not familiar with all of those different programs and what they will entail, but I don't know if Robert's able to speak to that further, but for our purposes, the affordability period will be for those 11 units specifically, is what we'll be able to enforce.
Okay. Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions, if that's okay. One is a clarification. I was hearing what you were saying about the 11 units, but the bottom line is there's still 13 low. Of those 13 low, what you're calling low, 11 of them will be funded through the home project.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that's a clarification. So there's still 13 low, still 21 high, and still 11 market rate.
Yes, there's still
Okay.
the 45 units total.
So this, your letter really only needs to kind of put in that 11 will be part of the home funding and not
Yes.
that the whole 13 are part of it. Okay, I do understand that. The question that I have, and we've talked about this through inclusionary zoning and so on, we're not going to say these 11 homes are low income and they get not as nice fixtures as all the other places. It's
Nope.
all going to be the same type of build. It's just that you always have to maintain 11 as low income. Is that the way it's going to work?
So the way home, there's two different approaches. You can do what home calls floating units, which means they're not specified units. It's just some of them have to follow those affordability requirements. And then there's fixed units, which is like it's apartments A through J, and it's always those apartments. What we have informally agreed with NeighborWorks about is that this will be a floating project. So that helps ensure that, yes, there's the same standards across all units.
I appreciate that. I think that is the better way to go. This way, we're not singling anybody out and saying you're low income and you don't get the same stuff everybody else
Sticking
does.
them all in the basement.
Yeah, exactly.
Can
I
ask a
appreciate that.
question
And
on that before you go on to your second one?
I don't have any more questions, so
Okay.
please. No, I was
Thank
telling
you.
you, please.
Okay.
I'm done. Thank you.
Alderman Timmons?
I have a question, and I kind of wrote that down. So, out of that unit, you're gonna have your fixed and then your, adjustable, right? So you're gonna have some units that's fixed and some that's adjustable? How would that work in that 45 unit? Fixed rate
I think you mean
versus
floating.
adjustable?
Okay,
Oh,
so rents will be updated on an annual basis.
Okay.
HUD in the home program allows for that. It's capped at how much HUD releases its rental limits. And we monitor all of our home programs on a minimum annual basis to see, are they still within those limits? Have they, and they're also supposed to communicate to us when they're considering raising rents. And so we will be checking for that for the 11 units. I don't know what other, I think it might be time for, if you want to speak to the rents for the remaining units.
Yes, come on up. I didn't think I was trying to do that before, but I might have communicated it back.
Can we get you guys to sit up here?
Yeah.
That way you can just both
I-
talk
that's okay.
together.
Thank you.
Also, it makes our committee look a little more august,
Yeah,
not just one person.
just this side of the room though.
Good evening. My name is Robert Turney, and I'm the Executive Director of NeighborWorks Southern New Hampshire, the sponsor for this project and the applicant for the home funds, as Julian has described. Just one clarification on the differential between high home and low home. I just looked them up on the New Hampshire Housing website, and the reason for us selecting sort of the minimum number of home-assisted units is basically to give us more flexibility in being able to rent units within the 45 units. So if we said all are going to be home-assisted, then it gives us a lot less flexibility around income verification for people living in the properties. But the high home limits and the low home limits are actually higher than the rents that we have proposed in our project. So Nashua is in a pretty high market, and so the low home rent for a two-bedroom apartment is $1,377, and our rents are going to be between $1,265 and our market rate unit is $1,750. So the majority of our rents are going to be actually below the low home rent, and then the high home rent actually goes as high as 1628. So, so anyway, so it gives us a lot more flexibility on the rental side. But I'd be happy to answer any of the questions. You had another question about the rent structure. Basically, essentially all of our properties, and this one included, we charge a fixed rent. And so it's not variable. The rent is not variable based on the household's income. We do qualify the tenant based on income when they move in. They need to be below the HUD published income limits for the median income for the area to qualify to live there. But once they move in, they're paying that fixed amount every month. And so it's not like a built-in rental subsidy that takes up a portion of it for them. So all the rents are essentially fixed.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yep.
The reason why is because I would hate to see somebody move in and then they out in a couple of years or so.
Yeah, and our rent increases are usually pretty modest. This year, or 2023, we just did our rent increases for 2023. And it's the highest rent increases we've ever had because, well, our heating costs went up by 40% and our electricity costs went up by 100%. But our most expensive rent increase this year is going to be $50. So, like I said, that's the most expensive rent increase we've ever had in my tenure. But yes.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, excuse me. The low we have is 50% of AMI, the high we have is 65% of AMI, and the market rate is 80% of AMI. But when you say it's 30% of the adjusted gross income, that's the max you could go, but you're not going to be going to there.
Correct, yes, yeah.
And may I just follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. And so those 13 low that you have, and again, I'm just saying this for clarification, 11 of them are going to be based on the home standards, and those other two give you the flexibility to be able to maybe qualify someone that didn't necessarily qualify under
Correct.
home?
Yeah, essentially, the remaining 34 units, we would have that flexibility. And by being able to float those 11 units, it doesn't, if someone moves out and, you know, the next person that moves in isn't the home eligible person, it could be the unit next door that could be the home eligible unit. So it gives us a lot more flexibility within the building.
And if I may, honestly, all of the units in the building are gonna be some level of affordable. The question is always, you know, affordable for who? But the absolute top is 80% of area median income. It's, what we're talking about is what meets the very particular requirements of the home program, which is a wonderful program, very essential for so much great work, but can be a fussy program. So minimizing the number of units needed per home is really just aimed at minimizing reporting burdens for the agency, not reducing number of affordable units.
Yep. And the entire project is going to be encumbered by a land use restriction agreement administered by New Hampshire Housing Finance. They administer home funds as well. And so I think they're putting $1.6 million in home funds into the project.
Mr. Townsend and Long, just a piece of housekeeping. You have to actually repeat your names each time because the transcribers don't necessarily know your voice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a unmistakable gravelly voice, but you have to be here for months.
And mine is just annoying, so.
So just as a clarification, it might be challenging some knowledge here because I'm not sure myself, but we're talking about the home funds being qualified for a select number of units, but you're also saying that you don't necessarily want to tie them all to home because there's other programs. So for example, maybe some examples might be VA housing or family-based subsidy programs or Section 8, that kind of stuff, where maybe home has different requirements than those do?
That's true, and home tends, this is Robert again, the home tends to be, I think, one of the most restrictive, as Julia mentioned, from a reporting standpoint, and so it's, if you can get by with you want to try to get by with as few units designated under that program as possible, but knowing full well that 100% of the units are below 80% of the area median income, with the majority below 60% of the area median income, all of which fall below the home guidelines. So.
Okay. And just to touch on some points that were made earlier, I was not sure I was hearing that right with regards to the Davis-Bacon Act and this being under a threshold for minimum wage use. I imagine there's other restrictions that are there too, and I think that was what was referenced when someone I think Alderman Klee had said, like, so we're not cutting corner on the home ones. We're not like gonna use, you know, teenagers to put them together so that, you know, it's a fun project instead of an actual housing construction project.
Yeah.
They're all gonna be meeting all of the standard construction requirements, the city codes, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, this is Robert again, and yeah, and in addition to the housing, the city of Nashua's housing program and your monitoring, New Hampshire Housing has its own construction administration and monitoring program as well, so.
Just as an example from my own experience, working with Habitat for Humanity, I know, for example, you had to put a sprinkler in a closet in a basement, because that's what HUD guidelines said per square footage, and that ended up costing a lot of money because, I mean, people don't usually sprinkler their basements and do all that kind of stuff. So sometimes there's like an algorithm that's applied to things, or different needs at the federal level, or priorities of the, dare I say, political people involved. And it sort of like creates a big giant snowball of expenses for people who are just trying to make quality housing for people and don't have the same kind of access to overhead investors and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. This is Robert again. You know, our New Hampshire Housing actually establishes their design and construction standards for every project that they finance. And so it's always over and above the local building code as far as energy efficiency is concerned, as far as safety is concerned, and material durability is concerned. And so the architectural team and engineering team that we hire is very familiar with those standards and incorporates those into the design. And so I would tend to submit that an affordable housing development built under these guidelines is probably better quality construction than what someone might just do sort of on their own without sort of that supervision and set of guidelines
Their grandfather's
looking
time.
over their shoulder, yeah.
My last question, then I'll let Alderman Klee have another shot. I know Director Sullivan is well aware that as the Ward 4 Alderman, where these developments take place, every time we're building a new building, the public starts saying, like, when they notice what's going up, is there like a picture? Are there designs? Is that kind of stuff? Is that on the way?
There are, and I didn't bring any.
As a
On the
suggestion,
website.
we have at least one alderman who's really, really in favor of maps. So if you include that in the communication, it might make it easier for us to kind of look at it.
And that's very doable. We have it, we can definitely share that, provide that, so.
That'd be great.
Okay.
This is Julian Long. I can make sure that's included in the resolution package to the full board.
Okay,
That's
much
perfect.
appreciated.
Absolutely.
Alderman Lee.
Thank you. Kind of on a different subject, but the same, in your memo, you talked about, based on the above fact, the recommendation is that the amount of $450,000 is in the form of a forgivable 20-year loan with the company 20-year affordability requirement. Can you kind of explain that more to the public as well as us, so that they understand that I'm sorry, I'm groping for words here, but I believe that Alderman Lopez kind of hit on, or Alderwoman Timmons did, that for X amount of time, we have to remain within this status. So I don't know if that's within the 20-year or if this is forever, it's going to stay this. But if you could talk about the 20-year forgivable loan, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, this is Julian Long, Urban Programs Manager. Yeah, so for every home project.
You might want to bring the microphone up a little bit to you, yeah. Thank you.
Apologies.
That's okay.
For every home project, the project is subject to what HUD calls the affordability period. It ranges from 5 to, I believe, 30 is the maximum. And all of the units that are designated as home-assisted units for the project have to fall within what HUD considers affordable for that entire time period. As we discussed previously, HUD puts out its annual rent updates, and so that is the limit on how much you can increase rents year to year. That's determined by HUD and by their formula. It breaks down to the urban area, so it's a very localized number. And depending on how much funds are committed to a project, how many units are involved, that determines how long the affordability period is. For this particular project in its size, it'll be 20 years. Once the affordability period is successfully completed, those units can shift. They can become, the owner of the units can then do what they wish at that point.
Okay, thank you, that clarifies it.
Might I add to that, if it's okay?
As long as you give us your name first.
Yep, it's Robert Turney again from NeighborWorks. I mentioned before that New Hampshire Housing records a land use restriction agreement. They actually put a minimum of a 60-year affordability period on the property. So even if we wanted to opt out at the end of the city's 20-year affordability period, we have to adhere to a 60-year affordability for New Hampshire Housing.
We won't be here to remember that, but that's okay.
One point of curiosity, because for a while I managed the building behind that. It used to be Maple Street's out there and it's been since sold.
Yes.
Is the city considering giving access to that fire alleyway or fire lane, or is all the traffic from this building expected to go onto Main Street just the one way?
During construction, I'm sorry, this is
No,
Robert.
no, when, in terms of the design, I don't know if you've gotten that far along, but.
I'm picturing the building in back, and there is a little foot alley that you couldn't drive a vehicle through it. In front of that building, that will remain between our buildings.
There's one, if we're talking about the same one, it's surprisingly wide. I literally saw a fire truck going there once. But I'm just mildly concerned that there's only one way in or out. If there was a crisis or disaster or something like that, it might be something for fire to look at. But I assume they're gonna do that when they do their review.
Yeah, I'm
process.
pretty sure they are involved in the whole design process.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Alderman Timmons, is that
Oh,
hand up?
thank you. I do have a question regarding fees. I read that you had a $27,000 fee, and I want to know, what do that mean? Administrative fees is in your documents, and I
let's
didn't
see
have a
here.
print stuff out, but,
In the development budget, yep.
yeah.
Under the number, this is Robert again, on our operating budget that we submitted, we are carrying $27,000 in, so you're familiar with the site, it's a very small site, there's no place for tenants to park. We need to purchase parking spaces from the city. And so we are building that into our budget to pay for parking for tenants.
Okay, and a follow-up, please?
Absolutely.
So where would the parking be? I was trying to visualize this, and I couldn't. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure I can commit to where the parking will be. It's, I would suspect, one of the public lots that the city owns, either the Elm Street Garage or the Mulberry lot.
that's the closest, right, Tim?
Those are the closest, within a half a block, so.
Yeah,
I mean, the Mulberry Street lot is literally right in back of the property, but the Elm Street Garage is just obviously on the other side of City Hall. So we've just built into the pro forma a parking allowance to rent from the city for that.
Is that 27,000, is that annual? Or
I think, yeah, that's out of the operating budget, so that's an annual expense,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Alderman Clee has another question.
Of course they do. And you know what? It's probably going to be aimed at Director. He's coming up to sit down, Director Sullivan. It's kind of an ancillary question, but being on the planning board, things go through my head now. I know that there, oftentimes, no matter whether it's a nonprofit or not, they still have to get fees and pay fees for different permits and so on and so forth. Will there be a plan to come to the board or anything to request a waiver on any of these fees? Will they still have to go in front of the, I know I'm planting these seeds here. Are they, also, will they go in front of the planning board for any of these type of, the builds and so on that they have to do?
Absolutely. So Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director for the record. Regarding fees, there have been no discussions about any kinds of impact fee, hookup fee, or other waivers, and that's something we've actually had a deliberate conversation with the development team about. So as of this time, there are no plans for fee waiver requests. Obviously, some of you may be familiar, Braunstein is an example of a project that did have some significant fee waiver requests. Now, for the sake of the developer, I don't want to close that door, but at this time, there's absolutely no plan to pursue any type of waivers for fees. Relative to your second question, Alderman Clee, this is actually a unique project in that it is being proposed within what's known as the Downtown D1 Mixed-Use District. One of the development incentives that was put into place when that zoning was proposed and ultimately approved and has existed for many years is that projects that comply with the design standards within the downtown D1 district are actually exempt from the planning board review process, regardless of how large or substantial in nature they are. And so one interesting component, like the School Street, High Street project that you're seeing being built right now, this project will not be going to the planning board for review in the traditional way that a housing development would. Again, that's an incentive that was built into the zoning to incentivize housing development and other development of this type. There will, however, and this actually started today, there will be a fairly detailed technical review process involving all of the same customary entities, fire engineering and the like, of the project as it's proposed. And so fire access is one issue that came up on the call today. So I do want to make it clear for the public that there'll be the regular level of due diligence and review of this project that there would be of any other.
I appreciate that, and I have a follow-up.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you. I know that parking was mentioned, the $27,000 and so on. Will they still have to meet the normal parking requirements of the downtown area? I know there's a little different downtown versus, yeah.
So great question. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. The answer is they will have to comply with these standards within the ordinance. One of the things that's unique in the downtown is that there's very little parking requirement. In fact, there's none. And so you are able to provide spaces, or sort of in our conversations with the development community, our ask is that in order to meet the needs of the market, that they do provide parking in some structured parking facility, whether that be an actual parking garage or parking lot. And it can also be provided through a private agreement between two private property owners. This applicant has chosen to pursue a conversation with the city whereby leases would be spaced as part of the long-term development and operating cost of the project. But within the downtown district, parking requirements are very minimal. That's actually something we'll be getting some more information on as part of the parking study that Director Cummings is championing. But as of this time, there's no requirement for parking for developments of this type.
Again, may I have a follow-up?
Alderman Clee.
Thank you so much, and I hate to belabor this particular thing. My only concern with the parking and the city providing the parking is we also have the new Performing Arts Center coming through too, and my concern is that if we take too many parking spaces from our already somewhat leased, that we're doing a disservice to them as well as to our new thing. So the city will be balancing that, and will that be coming in front of the Board of Aldermen?
Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. Yes, the city is actively monitoring the number of leased and committed in some manner spaces within the parking facilities here in the city. To your point, Alderman Clee, we're aware that one of the unknowns is the success of the Performing Arts Center and the demand that it may bring on particularly weekend parking, I tend to think. That's only amplified by the fact that during snow emergencies, the parking facilities are heavily constrained as folks move into the garage for safety and security. So it is something we're actively monitoring. We're aware of the number of leased spaces. We feel comfortable. However, I do think that we may see a revisiting to the parking standards in the downtown and perhaps more of a requirement for parking on site in the future, believe it or not, to address that very issue. Because we are not going to be building a new parking garage, at least in any time in the upcoming years. We'll be working on the existing ones that we have. And we want to be careful that we're not overcommitting. I will point out that the 1113 Mulberry Street lot, which I'll refer to as the public health parking lot, is an asset that we've been very sensitive about as part of this process. That's an example of a facility that is at times overcommitted to the public health building, to other downtown parking. There have been direct conversations with NeighborWorks about that sensitivity, and that's why we're talking about alternative solutions to that. But your comment is well taken that we need to be careful overcommitting these parking assets to the developments going on downtown.
Thank you, and I'll stop here.
So just some comments of my own since I am the alderman for that area. 243 Main Street doesn't have any parking. For a while, they were using that parking, and then I guess they got tired of leasing it from the lady who owned it at the time. So that's definitely a precedent for a building downtown that doesn't actually have any of its own endemic parking. And then I was going to bring up the fact that there is a parking lot behind at Mulberry Street, but during the day it's used by the Public Health Department, as well as some of the residents I think might have leased it. So that's not, just because it's there doesn't mean they can use it. And then in the evening, the nightclubs in that area and the people who are using the businesses on West Hollis use that space as well. So it would be very, very competitive. And then there's been some scuffling over the parking lot, which is owned by Caribbean Breeze, but is borrowed by a number of the businesses that are down there, with and without the owner's permission. So it's a number of challenges with the parking, which could end up with people who are occupying NeighborWorks building having to move quite a distance to get to vehicles if they are able to find leasing. So it's going to be a challenge, especially if you have populations that are handicapped or mobility impaired.
May I?
Sure.
I'm glad that Alderman Lopez pointed that out, especially those that do have impairments and so on. And I can tell you, while I'm not the alderman for downtown, I do have an area that's a highly dense area in French Hill. And I'm often hearing about people who have to go to the parking garages. That's where they're told to park when they can't park overnight, or over by the River Walk or something like that. And it does create a problem. Obviously, it should not stop your project, but we do have to really be sensitive. Parking has become, I think, the number one call I get. Alderman Lopez probably may not get the same thing, but the number one call I get is parking. So I think this becomes an issue, and the larger the apartment, the more people that'll be in it, and the more cars that they will have. We're not back in the days when we put the parking ban in, which is for high density areas, is something that's needed. So, thank you.
Alderman Timmons, thank you for being
Thank
patient.
you. My biggest complaint from constituents is not the affordable housing piece, but units specifically designed for ADA compliance, wheelchair people that may need a first floor level, as well as seniors. Is there any particular space in these buildings that may be for those two people?
Yep, 5% of the units.
Don't forget your name. And
I'm sorry. My name
might want to
is
spell it once, too,
Robert
just so
Turney
that they
from
write it down right.
Robert Turney from NeighborWorks, Southern New Hampshire. 5% of the units, so 5% of the three, probably three, round up.
2 to 3.
Yeah, round up to 3 units would be fully ADA units. And the building will be serviced by an elevator, so the entire building will be accessible, but 3 units will be 100% ADA units.
Okay. All right, and what about senior citizens?
This is considered a general occupancy building.
That's what
It's
I was
not,
thinking that, but, you know,
we have over 500 units in our portfolio, and they're all general occupancy. We don't build exclusively senior housing or age-restricted housing. As just a tendency, about 13% of our entire portfolio ends up being senior citizens or people who are of retirement age, but it's all general occupancy. Now, this particular building will have smaller unit sizes than most of our buildings in our portfolio. We have a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom buildings in our portfolio, and this will be all 1s and 2s. So I think that tends to be more for either seniors or younger individuals who are starting out, as opposed to families. And of course, we hope that by being downtown, that it becomes walkable and easily accessible, and offer good mobility for folks who want to live and work and play and entertain downtown, and hopefully not have to be preoccupied with the vehicle. So we'll see.
Well, I really need you to say that because I have a lot of seniors, I'm one myself, that always ask that question, what about us?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad you said that. And I gave them that answer, by the way, and because Alderwoman Cleveland told me this a long time ago, so I knew the answer. I just need you to say what you just did. So thank you.
Oh, good.
Director Sullivan, you might want to have DPW or whoever's doing the sidewalk monitoring take a look at the sidewalks in an area, because they're handicap accessible by definition only and have kind of weathered the years in different ways from stretch to stretch.
Understood.
Any other questions? All right, then I guess if we have investigated as thoroughly as we can and hopefully anticipated any questions the public might have, I guess we could do a vote.
You can just do a voice vote, yeah?
Yep. So as a voice vote, all in favor of recommending final passage of R-22-076, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And motion is to recommend. So this will go before the full board. I definitely would put the picture and the details we asked for in that letter, just so that there isn't any kind of typically the full board isn't gonna go back and try to like re-examine a committee vote and decision, but it's definitely a project of a lot of interest to multiple aldermen, and it's easier to answer questions before they're asked, so. That was my thought.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I don't think you guys need to stay, but feel free to if you want to. Oh,
We
Julie,
have
you
a-
probably should hang out.
Are we doing the table?
All right.
If we're taking this off the table, it's up to you.
Are we taking R22-060 off the table? That's the ARPA.
Yes, this is Julian Long. No, this is still tabled. I do have an update. We finally received word from the person who will be providing our technical assistance, and I have a meeting set up with them for Thursday. And so, at the very least, next month, I will have more guidance from HUD. I don't know yet whether we'll be able to take it off the table or not, but with any luck.
Well,
next
let us
month.
know. We're hopefully not gonna hold you up, so.
Yeah.
Just give us a heads up. And I know we're gonna be moving in, if anybody's watching, moving into next year's HUD, CDBG stuff, within a couple of months, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
All right, so, that was the end of our new business resolutions. Any new business ordinances?
None?
Table in the committee, we just discussed that.
We're gonna leave that, yeah.
General discussion. All right. Any public comment? Any members of the public looking to
None?
bend our ear? Remarks by the alderman. Alderman Leah remarks.
Thank you. I always have remarks. Beyond saying happy holiday, and I know both Director Sullivan as well as Mr. Turney have both left, but I do wish them both happy holidays. I want to thank you, Mr. Long, for everything that you do as far as working with these, as well as Director Sullivan. I think it's very important that we bring this type of housing here, and for the public to understand that we're doing everything we can. I know it's a lot of hard work, and you guys do work very diligently on it. So even though I drilled you with all these questions about parking and so on, I appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Mr. Long and my fellow aldermen, I would just want to comment that Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the steps of City Hall, we're doing the longest night vigil. It's a time to come in solidarity with people that we've lost due to homelessness, to read their names, to remember them, to commiserate with people who knew them, and also to kind of dedicate ourselves to the issues and the projects like this that hopefully will keep that list from continuing to grow. So that's 6 p.m. right here on City Hall steps. Any further announcements from the alderman?
No.
All right, then if I could have a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I motion to adjourn by voice vote.
All right, without objection, we will adjourn at 7:42 p.m.
Okay?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, there was no objection.
No
Adjourned.
objection, no.